The more time I spend looking at a fishery, the more familiar I'm going to be with it. Even if that is on a map, even if that's on, Google Earth or something, that the time that you spend looking at a place just kind of helps make it more familiar. And a big part of that for this season, as I've mentioned multiple times, is the number of new places that we're going to. This has been probably a schedule that has had more new places on it for me in one single year than I have had in a lot of years, to be quite honest. Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel. We are getting on down with it on the Bass Pro Tour season at this point, getting pretty close to the end. We filmed these way in advance, so I'll be very interested to look back and see how the year has shaped out and how much of what we've talked about on each of these has really ended up being. If you've liked this series, if you've liked what we've done with previewing this, let us know. And if you want us to do this again next year, or if you want to see some type of different map study. But this was a way for me to, I think, to do a little bit of map study kind of across the country, but also showing with a purpose in mind, of something that I do spend time doing, of studying maps and looking at places before we go to an event on the Bass Pro Tour season. So kind of incorporating a little bit of that selfishly to where I'm getting a benefit out of it, as well as hopefully you all are too, so. And if nothing else, just the more time I spend looking at a fishery, the more familiar I'm going to be with it. Even if that is on a map, even if that's on, Google Earth or something, that the time that you spend looking at a place just kind of helps make it more familiar. And a big part of that for this season, as I've mentioned multiple times, is the number of new places that we're going to. This has been probably a schedule that has had more new places on it for me in one single year than I have had in a lot of years, to be quite honest. Stage stage 5, stage 6 that we're about to look at right here at the James River. Both of those new fisheries, and some other places that we've been this year that new or different times of the year and all the above, or places that I haven't been in a really long time. So, yeah, pretty exciting, and it'll be interesting to see just how the year has shaken out up to this point. Are we just trying to stay in red crest? Or are we shooting for angler of the year at this point? Just exactly how it's all working out. So definitely, and getting exciting once you get down to those last couple of events. James River, tidal fishery that has hosted a number of events, honestly, in the last few years. A lot of opens. I think they've had some Toyotas and stuff there. I have never fished the James River. Any of that stuff that I was fishing just didn't happen to be on the schedule on the years that I was fishing them. I fished the Potomac River just north of this a little bit. And then our last event was just down south of this on the Chowan River there in North Carolina. But I have never been on the James. Definitely has been a fairly regular stop for some stuff in recent years. But yeah, this will be my first trip to the James River. Actually, I should take that back. I've never fished a tournament there. As a kid, we had a couple family reunions that was in up here in Virginia, and we actually fished on the Chickahominy. Man, I'm gonna say I was 11, 12, 13 years old, somewhere in that range. We did that once or twice. We pulled a boat up there to those family reunions and fished on the Chickahominy. That was the first time I had ever been on any tidal water. So it's been a very long time, and really don't know anything other than I remember having some big bites on a frog and some lily pads, and we didn't catch any of them. But man, they were just absolutely just, whoosh, it's some of the first frog bites I guess I had ever had as a kid. It was interesting. But yes, I have been on it just a little bit. But the James, just from the stuff that I've read and studied, a very common factor that you read about when a lot of those tournaments go out of the James, most of the stuff launches up towards Richmond, but a lot of those guys end up fishing down around the Chickahominy River, which is, a tributary that feeds off of it. And this system, a number of years ago, they stocked a lot of Florida strains in here and did a lot of that stocking in the Chickahominy, and certainly why there have been some really big fish and some really big bags caught out of there due to those Florida bass stockings that that they put in place. And if you just look at it, just looking at this map, the James is obviously a bigger river, and it has some creek arms and some feeders and stuff off of it. but a lot of just main river. You know, it's got a lot of stuff that's on the main. Doesn't have a lot of big backwater sloughs and stuff. It seems like, you know, so not, I'm gonna say not tons and tons of spawning habitat for these fish, kind of on that main James River arm. But that's what, if you look at the Chickahominy, it definitely looks different. You know, you come in there, it's got those bays. It's a smaller river overall, but it's got all these other little fingers and tributaries and nice little nooks and crannies for those fish to be able to get in, back in, and get protected. So I think that's why the Chickahominy as a whole is a little bit more, you know, a little bit more fertile fishery. Maybe has a bigger population of fish in it, and certainly where I expect the bulk of our field to end up fishing, just given the history that's been, you know, what's been done there. The flip side of that is the fact that, you know, I was mentioning about all those other bigger tournaments and stuff, all that stuff going out of Richmond, you know, and all those tournaments that go out of there and local tournaments and everything else that launch out of Richmond. Well, all those tournaments that, you know, they're hauling their fish back up there and letting them go. I know some of the last tournaments or two that were up that way, that there were guys who did really well up there, pretty close to where takeoff is, and I don't even know exactly where it is. I couldn't tell you on this map where we're taking off from, but there were definitely guys that did well up in that part of the system, and I think a lot of that had to do with the fact that just over the course of the last few years, being more tournaments going out of there, a lot more fish have been released in that part of the world, and then have, you know, really boosted that population. So I think that's kind of the two main areas, you know, to focus on: the Chickahominy in and of itself, and then that upper part of the James up there around wherever takeoff is. You know, seems to be a couple of the two main deals. As far as fishing wise, you know, it's going to be your traditional tidal fishing. There's a lot of boat docks, a lot of cypress trees. Being that we're there in late June, the lily pads and grass and that kind of stuff should be up and be in full bloom by then. Um, I don't, I don't remember ever reading anything about it having a lot of mats or a lot of milfoil or hydrilla or anything like that. I think there's some, maybe some coontail, but definitely pads and arrowheads and that type of stuff. But definitely, it seems like hardcover is a big factor there. Those cypress trees, the boat docks, and again, being that we're there in late June, you know, it's going to be nice. The fact that our tournament just before this was on a tidal fishery only a couple weeks before, it should be very similar fishing. Might be slightly tougher by the time we get up here because it is going to be a little bit more into the summer. You know, going to be probably hotter than it was at that early June event. But should definitely be a fairly similar fishery, fairly similar patterns to the Chowan River. So that part of it will be neat that we should have two events that are, you know, somewhat similar, as long as you get on a pretty good rhythm as to how things are going and how you need to be fished them. But current is going to be key, being that it's tidal, flows in, flows out. You know, you gotta fish that tide change, you know, twice a day in a competition day, and that's one of those kind of deals. I have never, as I mentioned before, tidal fisheries have never been my strongest suit. Here in Tennessee, all water flows one direction. You know, if you're downstream of a dam, it may come up and down, but it still only flows one direction. But that, you know, the fact that water going in and out, um, you kind of have to just forget about that part of it and just realize that, hey, the water's moving, fish are going to adjust to it. They don't know any different. It's where they were born. It's where they've lived their whole life. Um, you know, it's what they know. So it might be weird for me. It's normal for them, and just got to adjust accordingly. But definitely, current will be key this time of the year, getting into the summer, and those fish will definitely be looking for that oxygenated water and set up in that current for it to be bringing them some bait. So, yeah, I think top water, shallow cranking, flipping, you know, maybe a swim jig, certainly a frog, and some of those kind of places. And the neat thing with that, and that's you've got two options. That's kind of what I was going to say. You've got two options of either trying to run the tide and say, hey, I'm going to try to catch this part of the tide window. I feel like they're biting best on a high outgoing tide, and I'm going to start here and I'm going to try to follow that as it goes up and down the system. Or like, this is an area I like to fish. I know there's fish in this area, and on low tide, I'm going to try to catch them this way. You know, mid tide, try to catch them on this technique. High tide, try to catch them this way. For me personally, the times when I've had decent tournaments on tidal fisheries, I don't do well running the tide. To try to, know all the little key spots that you got to hit at all the right times. For me, I just do best getting in an area, trying to figure out, ways to get bit at all certain times of the tide. That for me personally has been a way that's been more effective for me. I think if I knew any of those bodies of water extremely well, I would probably like running the tide, because then I could just take 2 or 3 rods. These are the baits I'm going to use, and I'm going to fish. I'm going to make a 50-mile milk run. But I don't know any of these places well enough, tidal water wise, that like I can make that milk run and feel like I'm going to do a very good job at it. I'm just going to be, flying by the seat of my pants and hoping that I hit a couple decent stops throughout the day. So to me, that's kind of the deal. You either want 10 rods on the deck and you're going to have 3 different ones for different stages of the tide, or you've got 3 rods on the deck and you cover a whole bunch of miles in the boat trying to hit those specific little spots, at each part of the tide that you're, whatever part of the tide it is that you're trying to run throughout the day. So, yeah, James River, another new stop for me this year on the Bass Pro Tour. And this is another one that unsure of when we're filming this exactly what the minimum scoreable weight will be. I could see maybe going to 2 pounds here. I could see it being a little bit less than that. But I think this should be a neat fishery, and from my understanding, has a decent number of fish in it anymore. Just looking at the weights from some of those events, and it seems like when they hit it pretty good, and they catch a lot of 2 and 3 pound fish, which should make for a fun, exciting event. It's neat that our event early in June, this event towards the end of June, both of these for summertime tournaments should be shallow water events. I don't see how they won't be. So it's not a lot of years that we get to fish in the summer, but still really focused on the shallow water tournament. So I'm excited about that. I think that's part of the reason I'm so excited about our schedule as a whole, is just the potential for that. So James River, new stop for me on the Bass Pro Tour, and I'm excited to go learn a new body of water.